Hi, this is Ellen Broderick from Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick. And each week we bring you a conversation with an individual who's found their passion and is pursuing it. This week, my guest is Danny King. Danny is a wonderful, talented, and dedicated mechanic. He takes pride in providing good work and cares both about cars and his clients. In addition, Danny is a race car driver in a particular type of racing called drifting. Danny, welcome. It's really nice to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ellen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So Danny is a mechanic in Central New Hampshire, who I came across, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And the thing that impresses me, Danny, with your work and your work ethic, is that you're very good at what you do. Number one. Number two, if you know that something is beyond your scope, you let your client know that. And number three, you care about people really deeply. And and it makes a big difference to feel like somebody is giving you good service and they're not like pulling the wool over your eyes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I just wondered where that comes from, that work ethic.
Um, I'd say probably examples set for me growing up were probably the biggest help with me as far as learning to do business, and also my work ethic comes from watching my grandfather his whole life in just the way that my family members all interacted with people in business. And I worked with family some as a younger, when I got started in the business. I was working doing grounds maintenance, and I started fixing their equipment, and just seeing how my uncles and my grandfather would interact with people throughout their day to day, with customers and things. And they all treated everybody with respect, and tried to give advice and help. And that's sort of where I learned to, they all got up every morning and went to work, and they did their jobs sick and whatever it took to put food on the table. So I had good examples set for me when I was a kid, as far as my work ethic was concerned. So um, I definitely, that's kind of just sort of where I carried it on. And I have a daughter who's 11, and so that was a big kick in the pants to say, you know what, it's time to buckle down and really start, um, you know, doing life and doing business and doing my own thing. So
So,
that's more or less where my work ethic comes from, and doing this business.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And how did you get into car mechanic particularly?
Well, I got into car mechanics sort of as a necessity. I didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. And so when I started buying cars as a younger teen, I had no choice but to fix that stuff myself. And so I ended up learning a lot during that time period. And I took auto mechanics in high school. I'd always been into things with motors from a very young age, just like I said, with my uncles and grandfather and people in my life sort of kept me involved in motorsports as a young kid. But once I started getting older, that's sort of what turned me into working on cars. Was just I had a knack for it, and I really liked what I was doing. I enjoyed the time I spent working on my own cars. And that's stuff you spend money on. You don't really make money on it. But when I got into this, it wasn't necessarily learning to make money. It was just about learning the skill set and just trying to hone in on that as best I could. But high school, I'd say, was really the time when I got the most into auto mechanics as a trade. I took autos one and two my junior and senior year, um, and then sort of carried that on into. I went to school to be a marine mechanic originally.
Mm.
Um, but I found where we live in the White Mountains, Central New Hampshire here, the marine industry is one that slows right down as soon as everything freezes in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And the cars were more consistent as far as, I got married, and like I said, we had a kid, and that sort of made me get a lot more serious about I need to have a steady, consistent income. And I was good at what I did. And so it's what kind of landed me back in cars, because I went and fixed boats for a number of years and decided that it was better suited for me to be back in cars and, they're a thing that are a necessity too, as far as business is concerned. Boats are a luxury. And so a lot of times people don't keep their boats and they sell them, but everybody's got to go to work. And, I like helping all my local customers and people. My business is in Central New Hampshire. This is where I grew up. So a lot of the people that I take care of are locals who have been working on their cars for a long period of time. And then some new customers where I've, like you, who I've only just met in the last 5 or 6 years. And, building those relationships is a lot more important to me than just making money, because your customers come back when they have good experiences with you. Uh,
Well, I remember my son, who I think was the person who told me about you, but it may have been another friend too. But he went to you, I think, before I did, because he was
sure,
living
Garrett.
next
Yep.
to Garrett, and I remember him saying to me that you had he had called you at one point because he was dealing with a situation where he was living out of the area, and he had brought his car to a mechanic, and the mechanic told him something that needed to get done, and it was going to be very expensive, and he just wasn't sure if this guy was giving him a straight line or not, and he called you, and you
Yeah.
gave him a method that he could find out. I think it had to do with one of the belts, that if he took a particular belt off and something happened or something didn't happen,
Yeah.
then he either would or wouldn't have to go through the process. Turned out he did have to go through it, but he felt so much better knowing that he wasn't getting ripped off,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of above and beyond. I mean, that's not something you expect from people. So there's something about um, the way that your generosity, really,
Yeah.
your generosity of spirit, where you are willing to share your knowledge and your expertise in a
Yeah.
way that really touches other people deeply.
Yeah. I think in this business, honesty is something that should be held in higher regard, and it's not. I get a lot of phone calls like that, not just from Garrett, but from a lot of my customers who may be out of state or in a different area at the time. And they're going, "Hey, Dan, this is what they're telling me." Um, and so what I do is I just give them my best honest opinion of what it could be, and what my thoughts process is on it, and whether it would need to be repaired right then, or if it's something that could wait till I could look at it for them. But really, that's what it boils down to. I think a lot of people, my industry in general, there's a lot of distrust, and it comes from a lot of dishonest mechanics who are looking to fill their pockets. And in that instance, those guys were not being dishonest, and I love that. I would rather find that the mechanic that's in question is doing a good job and is actually, shooting straight the customer that they're dealing with. Uh, and I'd say it's like, 50-50. And sometimes they're shooting straight and sometimes they go, nah, don't do that.
Mhm.
Parts, in this time, parts have gotten more expensive. Everything's sort of on the uprise where we're seeing a lot of inflation. So it's harder now for me to go, oh yeah, that's way too expensive. And I really have to start building quotes because parts have gotten more money. And a lot of times that's what it is. Somebody will call me and go, hey, they want to change my front brakes and it's $800. And I go, that's a lot of money for front brakes. Let's talk about it. Let me build you an estimate before you just go spend that money. Um, and I think it's sort of on the job of the mechanic that they're calling about to make people not feel like they need to call me. Um, but also there's a lot of business things that go along with why I do that too, and why those guys are doing that. They have in a lot of instances, have a lot more overhead than I do, where my shop is small and it's sort of a humble garage I have at my own home. Um, I don't have a lot of overhead, and I don't need to upsell customers that way. And I didn't ever want to be in business and be trying to upsell people. And I think letting people know that their car is safe or it's not safe, and these are the reasons why, and giving people some time frames. Because I've been doing this long enough that I can look at your brakes and go, yeah, you probably have another 6 months on those, rather than try to sell them to you right now and make some money. your brakes are all right. So we leave them alone, and you'll come back and see me in 6 months because you had a better experience me being honest with you about that than me trying to say, oh, you need them right now before you leave, which is a lot of what you get when you go to other shops. And so that's, I think it's really just as far as why I do business that way is really just yeah, I mean, helping humanity out a little as much as I can, and also it gains me customers. It gains the trust of people when you're honest with them like that. And certainly word of mouth is how I build my business because we're sort of on a back road here.
Mhm.
And I don't do a lot of advertising. I treat people with respect and I'm honest with them. And that's really what builds my business.
That it's a good thing to spread that when somebody treats you with this kind of respect and forthrightness, that in return there's also a let's get the word out about just how wonderful this person is.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that for sure. I mean, I hold other shops to a much higher standard now that I'm in business, and I go, you know what, let's keep them honest, and even some local shops. Sometimes it's not shops that are out of state or places where Garrett was down in Massachusetts, I think,
Yeah.
at a shop down there when he called me, which I wouldn't necessarily know, but there are even local shops closer to my area that um, not that I force them into being honest, but there's a lot of local people that will call me and go, I want your opinion, even though I'm at this other garage. And that makes me feel good in itself. But also there's a fine line there because I don't want to step on any toes in my neighborhood. But also I think that they know how a lot of the local shops know how honest I am. And it keeps them a lot more honest also. Because
That
people are going to
spread.
call me and I'm going to tell them the truth, the truth will set them free kind of deal. But
Yeah. Well, so deep appreciation for that. Um, about your daughter, and does she get an opportunity to pick up the kind of ethic that you have? Does she get to see that and experience that the way that you saw and experienced it with your uncles and grandfather and other family members?
absolutely. I sort of make sure of that also, but because my shop is at home, she's here a lot when I have interactions with customers and she's in the shop sometimes meeting them and seeing how I deal with people in the day to day. And also, I think I do a good job of explaining to Jocelyn why I do that. Why we treat people with respect and that's the thing that makes sure that we can have food on the table and why we have a roof over our head, to give her that understanding. And that's why dad goes out to the shop every morning and comes in late every night. And that's what I'm doing. And I think she has a good handle on that. And she's a great kid.
Yeah.
Um,
It'll
so
be interesting to see, where she takes that, because she has her own interests, I'm sure. But the example that you're setting is applicable to any field, really.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I think she will, she is a young artist who is in love with horses. Of course, she's 11 years old soon. And so we try to facilitate anything that we can do for her and what she loves to do. She has plenty of horse riding, and I think that later in her life she'll definitely carry on. Watching dad be out there and working hard to make it by and to also have fun. I try to remind her of that because it's not life is not all about work. Um, and so we try to have some good balance, but I think she's definitely picked up on it enough to carry it through her life, and that's my hope anyway.
yeah, I'm sure she's picking up things all the time. And it's interesting that she has a love of horses, because I'm thinking they're both modes of transportation, aren't they? Horses and cars.
They are. She's a lot braver than me though.
You don't get
Horses are a whole different animal.
Yes, they are. And Danny, I wanted to touch too on there was a day I think it was probably almost a year ago now, where I came and brought my car over, and you were telling me about this kind of race driving that you do called drifting. And what impressed me because I knew nothing about drifting itself, was how excited you got about it. And I'm always looking for places where people, light up, people get enthusiastic. So can you tell us a little bit about drifting, what it is, why you got into it, and what about it excites you?
Um, yeah, so what got me into drifting? I mean, I guess, drifting is sort of a thing that, as a kid and learning to drive, and especially up here in the north where it snows, um, with my little rear wheel drive pickups I had as a teenager, I sort of learned the love of going and doing donuts in the snow and getting sideways with a car and the feeling that you get when your car is doing that. Um, that's sort of where I started to learn to love what drifting is, although I didn't know what drifting was at the time. Fast forward a whole bunch of years, and I'd sort of learned what drifting was through the internet mostly, and video games and things like that as a younger guy. But drifting was never something that was a thing that I thought I would be able to do until later when I owned my own business. And I didn't even realize that drifting was a motorsport in New Hampshire, because I knew that drifting had originally was a thing that was in Japan, and had slowly started to spread to other countries. And it has been in the United States for quite some time, longer than I've been drifting. I've probably only been drifting since 2018, 2017. I built a car to bring to the racetrack, and then it took me a little while to do that. But um, once I went for the first time and got brave enough to bring my car down there and look like a fool in front of a bunch of strangers, I found out that I wasn't the only one that looks like a fool down there. So that made it a lot easier, because nobody that starts anything is good. It takes a lot of practice. My skill as a mechanic took lots of years to get to that point, and so my skill as a driver, I expect to not grow overnight. And so I think going and drifting with that mindset sort of helped me. But I fell in love with it just from a feeling. The feeling you get from driving a car that way. And what drifting is really just the art of controlling a car that's out of control. The idea of it is to oversteer, and get the back of the car coming around, and you would counter steer into that and really just give it throttle and try to control the slide, and then transitioning into sliding in the opposite direction, and all of that through what's usually a cone course where I do it. And there's a lot of road course driving that happens too. But
Mm.
um, drifting, I found in a small community where we are in the Northeast, is a lot like a big family when you go race there. And I like drifting a lot because there's a lot of, sanctioned racing at tracks where, on Friday nights or Saturday nights, everybody gets together and they're racing each other for a first place position. And there's a lot of battling back and forth between people, and arguing, and there's sometimes fights in pits. And that's something you don't see with drifting. Everybody has a common goal. We're not, nobody's there to win a first place trophy. We're all just there to have fun. And when our cars break, we help each other. When we run into each other, we give, you rather than fights, you'll see people hugging and helping each other fix their cars back up. It's very friendly, family oriented sport,
Mm.
a motorsport. And that's, that's sort of what keeps me going back to it. I work for our club now. It's Northeast Drift Coalition. Um, and, I'd say that I spend a majority of my life during the summertime, and then during our season doing that just about every other weekend. And it's something that I bring Jocelyn to do, my daughter, and she rides with me in the cars. But I don't think that she'll be a drift car driver. She she definitely doesn't have the love for that like I do.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you had said before that that life isn't all about work, and it sounds to me this time, and also when you first started to talk about drifting, just sort of casually to me, that this is a way that you balance work with something else that you're really enthusiastic about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the fun that I get to go have. I definitely do a lot of what I do to take care of my family, but also to make sure that we can afford to go do this and have fun with it. It's a thing that's been a hobby, and I'd like to see it turn more towards a professional avenue of either building race cars or working with a race team, even if that's my own race team. But you never know. mean, that's a journey that hasn't yet happened, which we'd hope, at some point we can fill some big shoes, but you never know.
Yeah. Danny, as we come to a conclusion here, if people wanted to get in touch with you, either to find out, more about the drifting world and to connect with you in that way, or to, connect with you as a mechanic and get some work done, how would they get in touch with you?
Usually the best way to get in touch with me is right through my own personal cell phone is how I run my business actually. And I do turn it off sometimes because it's hard to be connected to your business all the time. So on the weekends, I'm sometimes hard to reach, and over a few days, especially when I'm racing, I won't look at my phone or do business through the automotive repair portion of things here. So I would say that's a good way to get a hold of me. Also, a lot of people will look me up on Facebook. I had a 223 auto repair page for people to go look at, and there is a phone number and a contact in there, but I don't look at it a lot because I found that in business, when you have so many avenues to get in touch with, I would spend my whole day looking through emails and Facebook messages, and so I tried to limit that down to just my cell phone number. But people look me up on Instagram sometimes to find out about drifting and what we do there, um, and then mostly just, I guess, if you really needed to find me, you could Google me and it does pop right up, as far as my business is concerned, and it'll show the Facebook page where people can find my number. um, Periodically we'll check in on those messages because sometimes they come through, where I gotta go empty out that message box and see if there's anything important that I've missed. But 9 times out of 10, if they haven't gotten a response from me in there, they'll make a phone call and get in touch with me that way.
Okay, great. Well, Danny, thank you so much. This has been a treat to speak to you and to hear more about like how you developed the kind of wonderful business that you share with this community, and the community is Plymouth, New Hampshire, and
Yeah,
Central New Hampshire. So again, thank you. And for Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick, look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks.
thank you, Alan.